Okay, great. So starting with the basics, which is why would you test in the first place? It's simply to test the assumptions and to improve the performance of our work, whatever that may be that we're working on at the moment. It's very easy to get, as we get more experienced in the field, to get a bit comfortable in what we know works and not notice when that perhaps changes. So it's really important and really valuable that we continue to check in with our supporters and make sure that what we're doing is the most effective thing. So you can test to get people to open click your emails more, to complete your forms more, make a donation. There's so many different things that you can be using optimization testing to do. It's for emails, it's for landing pages, it's for all kinds of things to improve your performance. Whatever your role is, whether you're putting on virtual events or whether you're trying to raise money, run campaigns, build your list, testing can help you. So the obvious kind of starting point here is, well, why not just ask our supporters what they want and then give it to them? Well, as a race, as a species, we are terrible at knowing what we like. People just do not have the self-awareness that they think they do. If anybody has ever done any surveying of their list simultaneously to testing, they would have noticed that what supporters say they want, what supporters say influences them, what supporters say they will take action on, does not match what they actually are influenced by and what they actually take action on. It's the classic, I'm not influenced by advertising thing. If that were true, why is it a multi-billion pounds industry? It doesn't make sense. We as humans aren't as self-aware as we'd like to think we are. And thus we have to test to see what works. So there's a few different ways you might want to be testing. So it comes back to the point on volume. So I know you mentioned with a small list, it can be challenging to do some of the bigger scale tests, but there are still options for you. So there's qualitative testing. So maybe session recording, which we'll touch upon in a moment. There are things like focus groups. Back in the day, physical focus groups. Nowadays, of course, there's more online focus groups. There's a whole different range of qualitative methods that you could take. You can also do quantitative methods. Typically, this means A/B testing, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But this is not an exhaustive list. There are so many different ways to test your assumptions and to improve the performance of what you're doing. So we start with qualitative. So there's a few digital options for this. It's not just gathering a representative group of people in a physical or a Zoom chat, I guess, nowadays. With qualitative, the why is that it can get you valuable data with low volumes of people. You don't need to have a list of 10,000 plus people to do testing for qualitative. And it also allows you to identify user flows and friction points. So when I talk about qualitative here, instead of saying like, oh, 23,000 people took the action when I phrased it this way, 10,000 took it this way, you're saying, I'm watching individual experiences of my page, of my content. And it allows you to craft hypothesis for then going on to quantitative testing if you want to do that as the next stage. So as an example, there are loads of tools out there that allow you to look at sessions on your website. This is, I just kind of pinched this from the website of one of these tools. I would always anonymize these, by the way. This example doesn't anonymize, but I'd always anonymize. So with this, you can see people going to your page, completing your form, navigating around the page. You see what they look at, you see where they click, you see where they get stuck in the form, where they get error messages, etc. It's a really good way of identifying points of friction that you can address. This is really helpful if you've got a small list, but also if you've got a form that doesn't get a huge number of completions, like a regular giving sign up, you're probably not lucky enough to get tens of thousands of completions every month. So qualitative testing can be really valuable for you there. But generally speaking, when we talk about optimization testing, people are talking quantitative. Generally, that means A/B. So the why on this is, of course, that you get statistically robust learnings. You're not just watching a dozen people and going, oh, they got a bit stuck here. But you can actually say, I know that for my list, this framing, this picture, this structure, this approach works best for them. So I've mentioned A/B testing a few times. Those of you who checked the higher numbers in the poll are probably very familiar with this. But those of you who are a bit new, I just wanted to take a second to explain what I mean by that. A/B testing means you create two versions of something and you send them or you deliver them to a part of your audience and then you roll out to the rest. For example, really simple example is a subject line test. So maybe I have one subject line that goes to 5,000 people. I have a different subject line that goes to 5,000 people, and whichever one performs best, I send to the remainder of my list. So that's an A/B rollout. But what you'll find as well is if you have a smaller list, maybe you don't have enough to be sending 10,000 just as you're testing. So you might then want to look at just straight A/B, where you don't have the rollout. The important distinction here is that if you're doing a test that gives you learnings that you can only use right now, so if you're doing a subject line test, that's not going to inform you for very long. It's going to inform you for one email. Doing an A/B without a rollout makes no sense. Whereas if you're doing a test that allows you to learn something that lasts a while, if you're launching a brand new campaign, for example, and you're not sure how to frame the issue, you could try 2 different framings. The learning from that you can then apply going forward for months. You can get away with just an A/B rather than an A/B rollout, which is immediate. So this one's more versatile. This one is acceptable in some circumstances if you're getting a long-term learning and your list is small. Does that make sense? Any questions, pop them in the chat. I can't see the chat while I'm presenting, so Rebecca, just shout if things pop up. Cool. So I wanted to also just note statistical significance in this context. So statistical significance is really important when you're talking about quantitative testing. If you just ran the tests and looked at the numbers and go, well, more people did the thing I wanted from this version, you could come to incorrect assumptions if your data sample is too small. So statistical significance means it's the level at which you can say the results I have from the number of people who have seen my tests is clear enough that I can apply it to the rest of the list with a high level of confidence that it will work. So achieving this depends on the size of your sample, so how many people are in the test group, and the difference in performance for each version. So the difference in performance, the greater that is, the smaller the sample size you need to get away with it. That makes sense. So if you have an enormous list of people, so if you're doing like a presidential campaign, you're emailing millions of people, even like a 0.1% of improvement on something can be statistically significant. But if you're emailing just say 15,000 people, you need to have much bigger variance in performance in order to be able to apply your learnings going forwards. Again, any questions about that, feel free to ping. I've deliberately avoided the terrifying statistical modeling graphs around explaining what statistical significance is, because nobody needs that unless you're an actual statistician. But what you do need to do is to use a tool to find out whether your results are statistically significant. So loads of tools out there, you don't need to run the numbers yourself. My favorite is this absurdly simple site, which is, but is it statistically significant.com. And you pop in how many people saw the web page, received the email, of which how many were successful. So did your primary metric. And it will just say yes or no in big bold letters. So you don't need to worry about actually crunching the numbers yourself. Do make sure you're using this tool so you don't erroneously apply learnings when you haven't actually achieved them yet. That makes sense. So I want to just talk about the how and what of testing. So in terms of choosing how to do the testing, you need to be asking questions like, how big is my target audience? So if you're testing with your existing supporters, of course, this means how big is my email list. But if you're testing for recruitment, it means how big is my potential reach for recruitment? Like how much money do I have to spend? How much reach would I get for this, say on Facebook or Care2? And then the second question is, how quickly do I need the results? So if you're doing a test that only has a very short time of learning value, you need to be doing an A/B rollout as discussed. But if you actually don't need the results that quickly and they teach you for a long time, how long will the learnings be valuable for? You can explore other types of testing. So you need to be asking these among other kind of key questions when you're trying to work out how you want to do this. And then choosing what to test. I mean, this is by no means an exhaustive list. This is just some of the things that you might want to be testing. I'm focusing here on email testing and page testing, because they're obviously the main platforms you'll be doing this for digitally, but you could theoretically test other stuff too. I know some organizations, not many, have tested like postal mailings and things like that. If you get the tracking right, you can do that as well. And then choosing what to test, as with all things, I'd recommend starting with your objective. So what are you trying to achieve? There's no point in running a test that doesn't get you closer to that. Then you want to think about what factors might affect progress towards that objective. You can really help answer this question by looking at the existing performance of your communications. For example, are your click-through rates great, but your open rates are poor? Or are you getting really great opens and clicks, but you're getting really poor conversion on the page? And by doing that analysis, you can say, oh, well, it's the page conversion, so I need to optimize the page. Or it's the opens, and therefore I need to do subject line testing. Of course, also look at what you've already tested. So if you've already tested something before, it's not a priority to test again, and then you can prioritize. With the prioritization, I like to create like tables. I have an awful lot of Google Drive, like Excel tables, where you just list what you were testing, like what your expected outcome of this is, and this is going to be informed by those questions you've asked. So if you know that your conversion rate on your page is already great, then the expected impact is probably quite small because you've only got a small window for improvement there. Whereas if you know that, say, your open rates are horrendous, then actually the potential for improvement by doing subject line testing is much higher. This is not scientific. This is like gut check optimization, but generally that's the best you've got until you've done the testing. I wanted to note the difference between immediate and long-term testing, give a few examples of things that you need to know, you get the results for right away, and things you've got to be really patient for, like where you've got to wait 6+ months to get your testing results. So a few examples, some of these will be very familiar to you if you've read some of our reports, some of them will be new as well. So the first one is an oldie but a goodie, which is an example of a landing page test. So this was way back in the day where we were trying to work out what the best approach was for getting people to opt in for an email list. And so we tested a checkbox against radio fields. It's old school stuff, obviously. Everybody knows now it's radio fields, but we delivered 50% of the people who were going to that page saw the checkbox, 50% saw the radios. And as a result, we were able to see that the radios almost tripled the opt-in rate. No brainer, definitely statistically significant. All of the results we got here were statistically significant actually, because we had good volume. But, and it's worth noting here, the importance of considering the metrics you're looking at when doing the testing. So you have to have a primary metric, but you might also consider secondary. For example, here, you can see that the conversion rate for the form went down with radios. Oh, hang on, other way around. Sorry, I got those numbers thrown around. It went down for radios, ignore the slide. So this means that if I was actually applying opt-ins for, say, a donation form, I probably wouldn't use radios because even though they increase the opt-in, they hurt the conversion. So you need to consider those other variables as well. Next example is a long-term test I did with landing pages where we were looking to boost the number of people making a donation in a welcome journey. So we had already done loads of testing on this, and we noticed that people were donating on thank you pages when given the opportunity. So the hypothesis was like, if we included a donation ask on every single thank you page, could we boost the donations of people throughout this journey? And the numbers we got here, as you can see, singles relatively the same, regular slightly higher. But when you look at statistical significance, that's not statistically significant. That didn't change. That's not statistically significant. It doesn't tell us anything concrete, but the unsubscribe rate was significant. We were losing people by asking for money too much. So that taught us that we needed to scale back a little bit to find the balance of asking for money at appropriate times, but not every single thank you page. It took me, I think, about 8 months to get enough data to get these results. So you've got to be patient sometimes. The upcoming examples, we don't have data for yet because they are live tests. Or they're upcoming, they're about to be launched. First is an email testing example. So this is a project with Versus Arthritis that Rebecca's working on. And the objective here is to increase the number of donations made on donation email. So what they're going to do here is they're going to test what difference it makes, who sends the email, so how it's framed, who it comes from. The first being somebody who's affected by arthritis, and the second being a professional, like a scientist. Who's doing the kind of research that's being funded. And the success metrics they'll be looking at, of course, is the amount of money that's donated, but also considering the number of donations, opens, clicks, etc., to see if that makes a difference. If you're interested in results on these things, drop us an email and we'll try to give you a nudge when we get them. And the other one is, so I've deliberately made this pixelated because this case study isn't quite signed off yet, but it will be soon. So this is a very large UK organisation. And this is a welcome journey that we've worked on for them. The goal of this, so this is for people who made a cash donation. The goal of the welcome journey is to get them to make a second cash donation. So the whole welcome journey is being tested. At this point at the beginning, can you see my mouse, by the way? Oh, I'm waving it around, yeah. So this bit at the beginning, randomly splits the data coming into the welcome so that half of it gets the top journey and half of it gets the bottom journey. Now, the difference between these journeys, as you've probably noticed, the top one asks for money more often. So we're looking to test similarly to the freedom from torture example. If we ask more, do we get more, or do we actually alienate our list and lose people through unsubscribes? So we'll be looking at the number of supporters who make a donation in the journey, but we'll also be keeping a close eye on unsubscribes, engagement rates, and that kind of thing. Brief note on tools and tech, because I noticed some of you said that was a barrier to your testing. You can do qualitative testing. There's loads of different services that allow you to watch sessions of your users. Some of them are pretty affordable. I think InSpectlet is quite affordable. I've definitely used that one before. But there's Hotjar, there's dozens of them. Give it a Google, find one that works for you. But do try it. You can. The price point for entry is like it's like $50 or less a month. I think they're mostly American. But give it a go. It's really worth trying. With quantitative testing, with email, you can just use your email tool. I mean, please do. I assume you're all doing that already. If not, have a look into it. Any email tool worth having has a testing functionality. If it doesn't have one, maybe question whether you should use that email tool, because it's very rare they don't have them nowadays. And for web pages, of course, you can be testing using wherever your forms are. So Impact Stack, etc. Or you can be using a dedicated service, InSpectlet, BWO, Google Optimize. If you're feeling rich, you could use Optimizely, but it's really expensive. With the first option, so where your forms are, I just wanted to say, so that's not like a native thing you can expect your form tools to have, but what you can do is you can use the A/B testing from your email to achieve that. So I do a lot of A/B testing just using email and Impact Stack, where I'll feed a value through the URL from an A/B split in MailChimp, so identical emails, but delivered with different links, and then use that link to deliver different asks, different form fields, etc. on Impact Stack. So if you're interested in how you can do that, please do reach out. It gives you really nice data because you can then export and see exactly who's done what at what stage. If you want to talk tech, please do reach out. We're always happy to talk tech. In terms of nurturing a testing culture, you're all in very different places as to what you need for this. So some of these will be relevant for you. Some of them are just no-brainers that you've already got. But of course, making it easy, if you're just getting started, you need to make sure you get buy-in for concept. A great way of doing this is showcasing organizations that are already doing it well. So I'd say a large percentage of the sector across the UK and Europe are already doing testing and really reaping the benefits. So speak to your contacts, get some examples of where that's working and get some buy-in. Set up a really simple process, especially if testing is new for you, to make sure that you're not getting a bit overwhelmed with all the million different options that you have for testing. I quite like to create an evergreen doc of testing ideas. So I've just brain dumped things like that you can be testing, like, oh, I wonder if moving that form field up would help. Or I wonder if actually if I framed that picture differently or I put it lower down, that would help. Dump all those ideas in that document whenever you have them. And then when you're running a test and you're short on time, you can just quickly scan the document and you can pick out a test that's worth doing. So it saves you that brain power when you're in high speed mode by having that list already. And of course, start small. If you've not done any testing yet, pick one thing you want to test and run the test and share those learnings. And then you'll that ball will get rolling, because once you've got those improvements, once you've got that information, it's a little bit addictive, and you'll find that you and your organization will be wanting to do more and more of it. If you're already testing and you're thinking about how you can make the most out of it and scale it up, the best thing really you can be looking at is how to share the learnings better. So how can you be working more closely across teams? How can you be sharing data across teams, learning from each other across the whole organization, not just your own results? This involves great record keeping, of course. It's very hard to share information unless it's being recorded properly. And that includes with future self. So if in 6 months you're like, oh, I did a test and I asked about this thing, I can't remember what it was, you need to have a central place you're keeping that information. And talk with your colleagues. Like if you do digital stand-ups where you will kind of say what's going on that week, what you've achieved, what you're going to be working on, make sure you include these kind of things in it. And what I would encourage as well is considering like having this could be on your local organizational drive, this could be on like a Google Drive or wherever. Have a spreadsheet with everything you've tested in it. So the date hypothesis, the variables, etc. And then you can all be using that same sheet, which you can make work really hard for you by setting up filters. So in my kind of hastily put together example, you could, for example, be filtering by, okay, I'm interested in email tests that have happened within this date range, or I'm interested in subject line tests that have happened, or form layout tests that have happened. And by adding those filters to this kind of master list of testing, you can get really quick information to make sure you're not repeating tests that don't need repeating, but that you are, you know, learning from past things and going, actually, that test is a bit stale now, let's refresh it. Good record keeping is really going to make a big difference for you. For those of you who are new to testing, just want a little bit of a guide for getting started. There's a little testing template for you. We'll obviously share this if you're interested, and you can just think through, what am I testing? Why am I testing it? And how am I going to measure my success? Hopefully that makes things a little bit simpler for you. So